Well, good afternoon. Here in Central Time, give a shout out to Central Time. I would like to welcome everybody back for our third group and panel session for the USCCE Virtual Summit. The title of our panel session today is How COVID-19 Might Change Coaching Education and Coach Development. I am Roch King. I am the Chair of Sport Coaching at the United States Sports Academy in Daphne, Alabama. And I'd like to introduce our very distinguished panel. We have a variety of responsibilities, teaching assignments, expertise. And I also, for those of us that have been around for a long time with USCCE, also there is a nice mix of older or veteran and newer voices. So I'm going to read these off in order and introduce everybody to who we're going to get to hear from today. And then we'll move directly through the project. But before that, I'd like to thank KT Tape for supporting our virtual summit, particularly coming in on fairly short notice when the decision was made to go with this route. Those of you that have just joined, if you could rename, if you haven't done so already, type your comments and questions in the chat. I'll be moderating those as well. So starting us off this afternoon is Mr. Tom Avischious. He is the Senior Director of Team Services for USA Swimming, the national governing body for the sport of swimming, both pool and open water. And as we were mentioning, he's been around this coach education group for a long time, and we're looking forward to hearing from him. Next up will be Karen Collins, who is an expert in coach development and coaching education, coaching philosophy, and leadership development at the University of New Hampshire. She currently serves as the chair of the Department of Kinesiology, where she is responsible for the oversight of 5 academic programs, including sports studies, exercise science, health science, athletic training, health and physical education. In addition to a faculty role at UNH, she served as the Sports Studies Program Coordinator, the College of Health and Human Services Faculty Fellow for Teaching Excellence. She's also a sports psychology consultant for the Department of Athletics, and she directs the Leadership Development Program for female student athletes. Following Karen will be Eric McMahon from the National Strength and Conditioning Association. He is the coaching program manager for NSCA. He joined NSCA after a 15-year career in professional baseball as a strength and conditioning coach with the Milwaukee Brewers, the Texas Rangers, and the MLB International. Mr. McMahon has spoken both in the US and internationally on strength and conditioning topics, including the use of velocity-based training and technology to guide and monitor the training process. In his role, which is fairly recent, I'm sure he's going to tell us a little bit about that, as he's joined NSCA, he oversees all of the coaching education initiatives in the development of the NSCA's new sports science program. Following that, we'd like to welcome Dr. Kliethermes. She serves as the research director for the American Medical Society for Sports Medicine's Collaborative Research Network, and she is an assistant professor in the Department of Orthopedics and Rehabilitation at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where the research network is housed. Her background includes expertise in biostatistics and research methods. Dr. Kliethermes' research focuses on the application of statistical methodology and design to sports medicine topics, including youth sports specialization and participation, concussion, and running biomechanics. And finally, We'd like to introduce you to Kelly Kratz. She became a workshop trainer for the Positive Coaching Alliance in 2009 in the Philadelphia area. In 2014, she became the national lead trainer in charge of new trainer development. Kelly currently teaches the PCA training course to all of the new candidates. Kelly was a 3-sport high school athlete, a Division I college field hockey and lacrosse player at St. Joseph's University, and a D2 college basketball coach, high school lacrosse and basketball coach, and a double goal coach to all of her kids in youth soccer and lacrosse. Kelly was a 3rd grade teacher before joining PCA and has a master's degree in guidance counseling. So I hope that you're all excited to hear from them rather than from me. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and I will turn this over to Tom Avischious.
So I think Roch mentioned the old people. That's what must be me, because I think I was at the first NKC meeting back in the late 90s or so in Denver. And my boss has been kidding me about that my gray beard, I look like Mark Hamill in his Jedi outfit. So I guess that's me. What I'm going to do is go through some, first of all, USA Swimming's kind of response to how we dealt and are still dealing with the COVID crisis and pandemic. And then we have a community practice group that from different NGBs that meets weekly, and kind of threw out the thing to them. So I'm going to give also some things that they talked about, not just from USA Swimming's response. I guess our probably biggest thing that I felt like that we've done pretty well is that we were directed almost immediately. We have 8 staff people in our team services area that I work in. And we were charged with, we want to be able to say that we've had the opportunity to talk to every single coach that's a coach member of USA Swimming. Now, whether they choose to get on these calls, Zoom calls that we've been having with them, is kind of up to them. But that's kind of what we were trying to do. We have 59 local swim committees, similar to state associations, and it's divided up into 4 zones, so that each one of our 8 staff people, myself included, would have 2 people per zone that we'd be calling. And then a lot of these are literally weekly calls with the coaches in their particular, in each of their different zones. So I think this particular part, we've kind of hit a home run on, and we really felt like this is something that we needed to do, was communicate with the coaches all the time. Couple other things that I felt like that we've done pretty well is that we started a whole bunch of series of webinars, whether it was mental health for athletes, whether it was mental health for coaches. We started what we call the Technique Tuesday with our biomechanists would get on. So there literally was almost a webinar scheduled every single day. One of the other things that we do is our athletes are required to give back if they receive any money from our national team and our foundation in terms of a stipend. They're required to give back to clubs. So we set up a lot of Zoom calls where the athletes were actually talking with clubs. And so that was a great way to get, a national team athlete talking with a club on a local level. The other thing we decided that we wanted to do was be a clearinghouse for information. There were a lot of different webinars that were going on from outside kind of endemic to swimming organizations, so that we acted as a clearinghouse, and we're still posting a lot of the webinars and other educational material. If we would find information from the SBA, the US Chamber of Commerce, how to apply for a PPP loan. We'd post all that information on our website as well. And we would have a bi-weekly newsletter that would go to coaches. So that was a lot of information, again, that we're trying to get out to our coaching community. I think going forward, some of the big things that we have learned is that this virtual communication, a lot of us now in this team services here, we live on Zoom, probably doing myself, and I know a lot of the other people in this area are doing 6 to 8 Zoom meetings a day, starting at 7 or 8 a.m. in the morning and going to 7 or 8 p.m. at night. We're investigating, what can we do a virtual club visit? That was one of the things that we've done as well, where we've set up meetings with teams, whether it's a presentation to athletes or coaching staffs. That's something that we're definitely considering going forward. And virtual courses, again, because we had to cancel some of our in-person courses, we're doing a lot more virtual courses going forward. The other thing that we have and it's not just coach education. We've always felt that it's really important that we teach our swim clubs how to run like a business. So we have a club leadership course that we run for boards of directors, coach owner and institutional owned clubs. And that's been one of the little success stories that we've had, where when we've done these in person around the country, it's a required 4.5-hour course that clubs have to take before they join for their second year of membership. And what we might have 10 or 15 people come to one of these courses around the country, where we'd have maybe 10 or 15 of them. We ran a virtual course. We've done some pilot programs with running this virtually, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. About 3 weeks ago, we had a course and we had 165 people on at one time, which for us is a huge win. And we've had one club that was awesome, where they had their entire board and their head coach together. Got a great testimonial from the head coach and from the board president saying their board has never functioned better, and they really told them to focus more on the governance and big picture issues than getting down to minutia. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about going forward. Some of the information that I heard from other NGBs as we were talking this morning, that basically as coach educators, we need to be more nimble and able to create multiple channels to deliver educational offerings on a larger scale. I think one of the big questions that all of us were talking about this morning as well was, how do we maintain quality when we're doing this just in a virtual situation? One NGB was talking about, and this was lacrosse, was talking about how they're actually going to be filming their presenters, their coach developers. They have to submit it, and then they're doing a 1 month and 2 month follow-up with the trainees, the coach that are actually in the training, to see did learning actually take place. The USTA talked about maximizing their face-to-face education and probably making a little bit shift to be more safety-based. And how do we blend that blended learning with the micro-coaching and scenario-based training? But basically, online training is here to stay. One that you're going to hear from tomorrow is Anna Swisher from USA Weightlifting. And a lot of us in our little community of practice are just amazed at what she did, that within 2 weeks, she moved all of their in-person to online courses, and really felt that she needed to do a big job on reflective components, been doubled or tripled. Their enrollment has tripled, and it found that it feels like the in-person time together will be better. and allow them to reach populations that they couldn't reach before. And then finally, challenges that I think are going forward that we talked about this morning is how do we create mentoring structures? And then if we continue to do this online learning and something goes wrong, is there any liability issues that we may have to deal with that maybe we didn't deal with when we do the in-person? There was some talk also about from some of the groups that may have 150 to 200 trainers, if they scale back to 100, just kind of get the best of the trainers. Do we need to scale things back a little bit? And then also we talked about how do we create communities of practice that kind of goes to that whole concept of mentoring and keeping that going on an ongoing basis. So that is what we talked about from the NGB perspective.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Karen.
Okay, so one of the things from my perspective, I'm going to address this a little bit differently and look at it from an academic program perspective. And so where coaching fits in our academic program, it's a track in our sports studies. And I think really one of the, I'm going to approach this from two different ways, kind of what has happened in the last 3 months and what it might look like going forward, which I wish I knew the answer to that question, but obviously we don't here. And so as I was thinking about this, one of the things that, you know, I've learned personally from an administrator at a university, as well as like being in the classroom, is, you know, particularly with coaching ed. So we're used to right now students being, I'm on a residential campus, a predominantly white campus, where students are coming into class 2 to 3 times a week over 14, 15 weeks to really come with the outcomes at the end of that. And what we had to shift to was dramatically different. And so some of the things that I think are really important to address right now, if I were preparing this 6 to 8 minutes 3 weeks ago, it might have been very different than me doing it 3 days ago. In that, you know, Tom just alluded to it, but safety now needs to be at the forefront of our philosophical foundation and how we're approaching coaching ed. And I also think, you know, what we've seen from COVID and what we've seen particularly in the last couple of days, we really need to reemphasize and restructure how we're doing diversity and inclusivity within these coaching ed programs, because it's the safety and diversity and inclusivity is all going hand in hand. And we've seen that in this pandemic. So kind of that's the baseline for some of the things that I'm going to share with you and where we go with that. So I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit here, but some of the things is where I've seen areas of concern and like what's happening and what we've needed to do. So we've needed to shift our pedagogy and how we deliver things, the class sizes, you know, so if we're going from 50 people who are used to being on a campus, they're all sent home. And, you know, faculty and instructors have, at UNH, we had spring break to take care of it, but a handful of days to completely shift the delivery mechanisms of this day to day. You know, we have to think about what that means for technology, for the people that we're teaching, and for our teachers and faculty. You know, a lot of faculty have to kind of relearn. How do we do this well online? How do we do it? Teaching in an emergent situation remotely is very different than preparing to teach a curriculum online. Those are two kind of distinct avenues to go. And we were faced with, we have to do this in this emergent way and kind of get through the semester. And that really changes. So that changes the content, that changes how you're delivering some of the things. One of the other things that we really need to think about, you know, is this, we've felt this Zoom fatigue. We all know it, we all see it, like, but in the students, we have to think about what they're going through in an academic program as well. You know, they have maybe 4 to 5 different classes, for a variety of different types of instructions in this kind of emergency situation. Some of them now, you know, need to go and participate in their like family financial situation and can't be in class. Like, so all of these different things are happening, and it's a lot harder to kind of read the room. You know, when you're used to having people face to face and you have this engagement back and forth, and on Zoom, right, like right now, if I'm trying to share a screen, I can see 4 of you, not 75 of you. So like, you can't read the room, you can't see it. You know, one of the other things that was really important to identify are access issues, and that goes right back to diversity and inclusion, and what kind of access, whether that from what we've had in the last 3 months, you know, I had students trying to write a paper on a phone because they didn't have good Wi-Fi, or they didn't have, you know, a laptop or things wherever they were sent home. You know, housing insecurity, food insecurity, all of those things coming into play, and how we approach our curriculum are things that day-to-day basis on a college university, we're not very good about thinking about, like on a daily thing. And so, and where that comes in. And now, as we move forward, that access is going to be, you know, who's gonna have PPEs, who's gonna be able to do these things, who's gonna be able to get the new software. All of that comes into play in how we're delivering. One of the big areas of question are kind of placement and liability. Those go hand in hand. So if you're an academic program, you know, you have students going out on internships and these sort of things. So this spring, all of those were closed down because everybody was closed down, right? So now they don't have that part of their curriculum. But now we're heading, as we head through the summer and into the fall, we don't know the status of sports. We don't know that we can send students out. And so how do we integrate some of those things and change our curriculum to be able to give them those experiences, but not have them physically be able to be there? And then if we are able to send them out, then there's a whole question of liability. And so if we have to send them out and they have to use protective equipment, masks, gowns, like coaching, you know, when I coach, I touch people with permission, you know, but I'm going to physically move them to show them how to show them how to box out, or those sort of things. But we have to take a lot of that out potentially now. But from an academic standpoint now, who's liable if one of our students is exposed? Who's responsible for getting their PPE equipment? Who's responsible for making sure the student understands exposure risks? The other big thing that comes into this on a college campus is, if we are in fact back face-to-face, which is a big if, but you know, we kind of can control what happens Monday through Thursday or Friday for the few hours that we have them in the classroom, but we don't have control over what's going on Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and how that impacts. So if they're exposing themselves with risky social behavior potentially that's influencing spread of infection, and they're going out into internship placements, knowing that they've exposed themselves in risky behavior, like on a college campus where, you know, it could be a petri dish for those sort of things. So all of those questions, as chair of a department, like I've lost a lot of sleep in the last 3 months thinking about like how we fit into those. And then the other big part is on a college campus associated with this, how do we maintain our program sustainability? Because now students are less likely to come back to face-to-face. Like, you know, enrollments are going to be low across the country. Any program that's low in numbers is going to be in jeopardy of losing program status and those sort of things, because it's about sort of butts in the seats and numbers and those sort of things, and how that impacts what we're doing. So it's really important that as we're doing that, we're able to kind of take these positives and how we can keep and moving forward. So some of the things that we've learned that we can hopefully move into as the fall semester starts, we've had a lot of faculty get really creative in how they're teaching, whether it's remotely and how they're able to pull these things in. We know that we need to be more flexible. It has, so this chat was going on in the previous session, but kind of that internship pass-fail, this has really exposed the value of grading in coaching practicums and what that means and what that could look like. What is the value of a grade regardless, when most universities this past semester went to kind of a choice of pass-fail and then we'll figure it out in the fall type of mentality. We know that there are inherent barriers in higher ed, and that brings me back to the original point of we need to focus on safety, diversity, and inclusion. And the people in our classrooms, in our coaching ed programs, what that's going to mean for a variety of different demographics. And most importantly, I think that we learned that this is really hard work. Like we all work hard on a daily basis, but making these shifts and these pivots in a quick amount of time and still being able to get good content and good programming and send out good professionals is a challenge, because we have to think of some of the implicit bias that goes along with all of this. And I think that really challenges us as educators to be able to step up and be thoughtful about how we do that. So all of these things are coming to fruition, and we'll see what the fall looks like. But again, like I challenge all of you to kind of rethinking your own curriculum and your own coaching ed programs, like where safety fits into that now. Safety more so than how do you execute a proper tackle, but safety in a much larger sense of the word, and how safety is related to diversity, inclusion, and specifically with access with any of these changes that we're going to need to make. So that's what I have. I'm happy to answer any questions as we go through. A little bit of different reframe for some people here, but I think it's really important given where we are. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. And yes, please just fire away in the chat section, and please frame up any questions that you have that we can bring back to the panel as a whole later on. Thank you. So I believe it is time for Eric McMahon. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me. Karen, that was great. And I think you really touched on just how broad and how extensive a topic that this is. And I think from an NSCA standpoint, our approach has been really identifying and putting out resources and bringing awareness to key areas that for our coaches to be involved internally with. What I was tasked with, a lot of coaches, my phone was ringing off the hook, and it was, hey, I'm going into this meeting and we need to plan a response for our institution. They want evidence-based, they want something tangible to take in there that's not my spur of the moment opinion. And so, like many organizations putting out statements, we're trying to respond very quickly, but to do it in a way that is meaningful and represents the audience that we reach out to. So it was a huge challenge, and we pulled together a group of people. So what I'm going to do today is share some of our resources, and it'll shed light on the questions that we've been asked related to strength and conditioning and fitness facilities. And then I'm going to loop it back into sort of a broader, where does this take us in terms of coaching education? And you keep hearing the term, the new normal. What does that mean? So I'm going to take this slide deck that was more resource-based, and then I'm going to relate it towards sort of this event in general. First and foremost, internally at the NSCA, we needed to communicate everything from exam prep, certifications, our testing centers. Are we going to adjust our recertification date? Does our liability insurance cover COVID-19 related challenges and issues? Our NSCA Foundation came up with a relief grant because people were losing jobs. The fitness community in general was hit extremely hard by this. I think while it's easy to focus on a lot of the negative, I will say the positive is we've been tested and we've come a long way in a short time. I think it's a real testament to who we are as an industry and as a field to see the amount of growth in such a short period of time with, the technology was there. And this is something I talk about in our sports science program is, all this science was there, all this technology was there, but now we're forced to use it and we're putting it in play, and it's changing the game. It's changing the way that we operate on a daily basis. And so we'll pull out of this, and I think we're going to see this as a very encouraging time for the future of, we're talking about coaching development today, but just our field and all of our fields in general. And so I think there will be positive from this. And I think keeping that positive mentality towards this is really important. So first was just awareness of our resources for our members and our certificates. So we have links on our website. The return to training, guidance on safe return to training for athletes paper came out, and it was a very concise summary of what strength and conditioning coaches need to know when they go into planning meetings with their institutions. And it's an opportunity for them to help lead that conversation, because, we have a lot of hands on, we're, as strength coaches, and I'm speaking on behalf of my baseball experience, we're in the training room at times, we're in the weight room, we're on the field, we're always in between a lot of the other departments. The downtime athletes have, the strength coach is always there, engaging, having conversations, kind of leading them to the next station at times. We joke that it's the get back coach, but that is one of those ancillary roles that we're always involved. And so I think that is a valuable perspective, but we want to empower our coaches to be leaders in the community. This was the landscape that we were addressing in the paper. And I think there are a number of things in the sports medicine space that can be talked about, but the big one, the big takeaway here is that the risks for athletes extend beyond the risks related to COVID-19. So this paper also pulled in inactivity related risks, and we look at the very unfortunate things that have happened, players going down, catastrophic injury, heat illness, rhabdomyolysis, impairing athletes for long periods of time, ending careers, and unfortunately lives. And so there's actually a new paper that came out today with the Corey Stringer Institute, and we endorsed that with a number of other organizations. So that's something to key in on. So this is just an example of putting resources out there, summarizing it, and making it digestible, because there's so much right now for our audience, for all our coaches, and even for athletes. And I'm going to talk about the responsibility of coaches and the responsibility of athletes in this process. So there's cleaning and facility considerations, as well as training considerations, and how to manipulate training for this time. But, we were very fortunate. Some of these resources were in the works leading up to this. So the first paper I'll talk about is our guidance on safe return to training task force document related to COVID-19. And it was just that. And basically the key takeaway is there's a printable guidelines checklist that you can bring into your facility and kind of just make sure you're on task with what you're doing. We got a lot of questions about how to spot athletes in the weight room. What is social distancing in the weight room? That is a huge question. I mean, that's hard to define. The traffic flow, quality of air, that was a consideration for Major League Baseball. A lot of those weight rooms are under the stadium. They're underground. There's no ventilation. There's no sunlight. All the things that you're hearing will improve or take the respiratory droplets out of the air. Well, a lot of weight rooms don't have that. You think of these old dungeon weight rooms, right? Well, how are we going to address that? And so those are some of the extensions that have come from this paper. Best advice is get in and get out, get your training done, and minimize your overall risk. And that's sort of the key takeaway, and we hear that in the media as well. Athlete and coach responsibilities. We all of a sudden, I say all of a sudden, but we've had these cleaning practices in place and maybe they haven't happened. So when we're talking about the onboarding of athletes into our programs, or new staff or interns, assigning and actually really focusing on those cleaning and traffic flow and facility management, weight room session management concepts. How many coaches should you have based on group size? Those are in-depth topics that we don't often get to, but I think we're going to need more awareness towards those, especially if we have a reemergence of COVID. And then we're out there training and we're on the fence of, do we keep training? Do we really cut things down, or do we stop? And then we have another period of inactivity. So this thing is going to compound, or has the potential to compound and grow. And so we need to be prepared for the subsequent follow-up of this. This is the joint consensus statement we did with the USCCE in 2019. I'd say this wasn't designed for a global health pandemic, but the 50-30-20-10 rule and the FIT principle apply across the board. And we talk about that in that paper with the Corey Stringer Institute that came out today. Basically, not doing too much too soon is a key takeaway. Establishing safe upper training limits. I think where this gets tricky is when you don't have certified athletic trainers or strength coaches that are very knowledgeable. If you're a sport coach implementing conditioning with your team, some of these principles are going to be not the right language for them. So I think in our communities, we need to do a good job of speaking across multiple disciplines with recommendations. This was an infographic of that document, and so just to key in on some resources there. And the last one is our standards and guidelines article for the field. You know, this is something that got overlooked probably in that article because it's a very liability-based article. But in terms of square footage and managing facilities and how many coaches and athletes per square footage, that is in there, and comparing them to other recommendations that have been out there state by state, those are they're on the upper end. So I was encouraged by the fact that the documentation we had was consistent with what's out there, and credit to the authors that were involved in doing the research and in a way preparing for the worst. Coach to athlete ratios, like I mentioned before. So these are some of the key NSCA resources that we're bringing to our audience, but there are so many others out there because our scope is only strength and conditioning, sports science. We broach into the allied health, but that's not our main wheelhouse. So I think we need to work with other organizations. And one of the key takeaways, going back to what Tom said, you know, communication is the key takeaway here. You know, we need to communicate effectively between departments. I know, you know, working up through the minor leagues in professional baseball, the relationship between the strength coach and the athletic trainer, when it's just you two out there in the middle of my first 2 years, I was in Helena, Montana. You know, we were the only probably CSCS and ATC in town. And it was, you know, we relied heavily on each other, and that communication and that relationship is huge. This is where all that work of building those relationships really pays off, because we're on the same page. This is just a summary of that document that I was mentioning and some of the recommendations that are out there coming through the different materials. So educating our coaches on these has been kind of our primary role so far. Number of resources, and so the athlete onboarding, the internships that Karen mentioned, you know, that's something, some programs are doing virtual internships. So what does that even mean? You know, what is a virtual internship when it's really about coaching athletes? And so, you know, I think that's something in our field that we need to address is, you know, internships in many ways have become like academic courses, very informal academic courses. And there's some value to the education, and so keying in on what internship and practical experiences are, I think that's something we always need to circle back on, because those experiences, this isn't the first time that those experiences have evolved and changed. It's just being really exposed right now, because there are students that are struggling to graduate because they can't get internships completed. So I connected with that point that you said, Karen, on that. But that's my contribution for today, and I'm definitely open to any questions that anyone has. And again, thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you, Eric. And the questions are starting to really populate the chat, and I'm going through those and trying to organize them for us to be able to get to. But now we'd like to turn our attention to Stephanie.
Awesome. Thank you. So as Roch said, my name is Steph Kliethermes, and I'm kind of one of the newbies to this group. My first time with this group was actually last year in Colorado Springs, and my world and my eyes were open to this whole field of coach education and development. And I come from the medical background, although I myself am not clinical. I work daily with our sports medicine physicians at the American Medical Society for Sports Medicine. For those of you who aren't as familiar with this society, it's comprised of primary care physicians who have their primary specialties in pediatrics, family practice, PM&R, emergency medicine, and they specialize then in sports medicine care. So I'm going to bring yet another perspective to this whole COVID kind of conundrum, and it's been really heartening to hear Karen and Eric and Tom talk about their perspectives and what they're doing, because I think we fall right in line. We may be approaching the topic from different perspectives, but the same concerns you all have are the same concerns that we have and that we're working on, and it just furthers the point that we all need to be working together and knowing what everyone's doing and sharing resources as much as possible. So I thank Kristen for helping us to continue this collaboration. I think there's a lot that we can do pushing forward. So to start, I think it's really just quite eye-opening just to think back that we all are going to remember when sports just stopped, right? For me at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, it was when the Big Ten tournament was canceled, and then subsequently March Madness was canceled. And that was a pretty big eye-opener for us, knowing that COVID had now hit the States, and that our world of sports medicine and sports was not going to be the same on the back end. And so we really had to think about shifting gears really quickly and really trying to understand what it meant to practice sports medicine when sports weren't happening, and how our voice and our expertise, or the expertise of our members, could actually help and be effective during this time. So where have we been? Well, we've been focusing our members, 75% of our members are team physicians from the high school level through the Olympic level. So the majority of our members serve in that capacity, and we've primarily these past 2.5 months been working on these return to play guidelines and how to get athletes back safely to sport at the youth level, collegiate level, professional, and Olympic. And we've kind of been spread out across the board. Primarily, much of my focus as the research director, and where I've kind of been pushed doing a lot of research in youth. So we've been working with a medical collaboration with NATA, which is the Athletic Trainer Association, and then AAP, which is the American Academy of Pediatrics, to really try and put a medical voice to all these guidelines that are coming out and help these different groups that are putting together guidelines really understand what our concerns are from a medical perspective. But you've seen a myriad of guidelines come out from NFHS, from local national sports, at the professional level, many of you just talking about national governing bodies putting out guidelines, and we've really tried to be a part of that. At the collegiate level, we've been working really closely with the NCAA. We formed an advisory council that meets with them weekly to talk about return to sport, especially as we're trying to broach this fall season and what to do with collegiate sports heading into the fall, and whether or not college campuses are even going to be back in session. So we've been kind of all over the board. We as a medical society have not put out our own guidelines, but really decided to take the route of trying to put our experts in the different pockets where needed, and to give that voice. But I think one of the most challenging parts for us has been the youth sport group. It's been a hard group to work with because there are just so many different organizations, so many different needs, so many different levels of youth sport. And our concern prior to COVID had always been about the professionalization and specialization in youth sport. We were seeing dropout and burnout and injuries and financial implications surrounding this. And once COVID hit, that really shifted because that no longer was a problem. Our kids were not being overburdened and coming to the clinics with overuse injuries or things of that nature. Now we had to really shift gears and think about how we're going to return our youth to sport safely and at the same time try and affect long-term positive change. So you may know that many groups have kind of begun to imagine a reset of youth sports, and this has come at both at individual organizations, but probably the most prominent is Tom Ferry with Project Play. If any of you have kind of listened to some of those webinars, his kind of tagline for this whole COVID response is, how can we turn a crisis into an opportunity and reimagine youth sports? And this has been really a big point of discussion, emphasis within our society as we see a lot of youth athletes. And our feeling and my feeling is that coaching, education, and development must play a central role in this. And there's a role certainly, and I'll talk about that moving forward. But there's always a silver lining. And the one thing that we have seen is this emphatic reemergence of free play. And that's been a really exciting component of this kind of crisis for us, something that we advocate for, and I'm sure you've seen it in your neighborhoods, but I see my neighbors next door pulling out a basketball. I haven't seen them pass a basketball in the 4 years that they've lived next to me, and so it's just really great to see. And this is one, I'm going to play this clip right here. Really interesting that a father and a daughter put together this contraption so that she could work on her volleyball skills in the backyard. And so she's still progressing in sport. She's still working on those skills in this time of COVID. And it's something that we're really happy to see and see the creativity that's going on, and something that we hope to be able to continue with and to continue to promote as youth sports come back. So just thinking, well, what might coach education look like post-COVID? First and foremost, I think there is currently a desire for coach education and development, specifically around safety and COVID. You listen to the CDC webinars or some of these groups, and the question banks or the Q&As are all from coaches asking, how do I do this in my sport? How do I implement these guidelines? And I really think that there's a need for this. And so I hope that this continues and that this is a really big opportunity for, if you're not, maybe it's infeasible to mandate coach education and development, but certainly in the short term, many coaches, including the youth volunteer coaches, are going to have to be somehow trained in COVID safety. And so how can we think about expanding that so that it's beyond COVID and lasts much longer? When you think about, I'm hoping that, and I think Karen was talking about this, and I think Eric kind of mentioned it a little bit too, but to increase the focus on athlete safety. So when you're training and you're training coaches to coach athletes, there's always been this big physical component and training on fundamentals and skill development. Well, now we're going to add the environment safety and how to keep the surfaces clean and the athletes safe. But there's also how Eric was mentioning, there's this concern about returning athletes to play after a long layoff. So some athletes are going to come in, they've been working really hard during this time period, and they may come in a different place with athletes who haven't had been doing anything and maybe undertrained. So how do we deal with that? But more importantly, or maybe equally important, is the psychological component. So at this meeting last year, we were having a lot of conversations around the sexual abuse issues, because that was kind of what was in the world last year, and this year is COVID. But expanding beyond sexual abuse, now we need to think about coping mechanisms or mental health of our athletes. We've been very concerned about the mental health of our collegiate athletes. We think they have been one of the hardest hit in terms of mental health. And that's not to say the other groups haven't been as hit, but it's something that is certainly on our radar and things we're thinking about. So how can coaches be conduits to helping athletes with their mental health and getting them any sort of support that they need? This is, we also talked last year about LTAD, and this is a great time to really shift our emphasis to focusing on skill development as opposed to competition, when the medical organizations are not ready for full contact sports to be competing against each other. Well, how can then we focus strategically on skill development and following the LTAD model, where that is more of the focus? Then this is really something that's been a theme throughout yesterday and today, and the times that I've been able to jump on this webinar, is that the training for coaches really needs to expand into communication and connection. So how do they develop interpersonal relationships with their athletes, with their sports administrators, with the parents, with all sort of different stakeholders, really giving them that feedback and help to be able to develop those relationships? Because as COVID progresses, the coaches are going to be the eyes and the ears, especially for the medical community. The physicians and the athletic trainers are not going to be at every practice, at every competition, especially at the young ages and the community groups. And so how can we empower our coaches and equip them with what's needed to keep our athletes safe? So other things like developing trust, understanding the development of athletes on all different levels, and really then how to be a leader. One of our members, Dr. Fran O'Connor, gave a really great webinar that's freely available. I can get you that link if you're interested, on the importance of leadership during crisis. And he put together an acronym called of HOPE, and talked a lot about honesty, optimism, professionalism, and empathy as kind of key constructs for leading during crisis. And I think that this can apply to all sorts of leaders. Our coaches are leaders of their teams, of their communities. And so these are kind of things from at least our perspective that coaching education could think about incorporating. And I know it's already incorporated at different levels with different groups, but certainly becoming more prominent beyond just the physical fundamental skill development. So the last thing I'll kind of end with is just really some questions. We don't know what return to sport will look like, right? What we do know is that we're not going to be promoting the flu game anymore. Athletes who are sick should not be playing. And I hope that expands beyond just the flu. And I hope we think about injuries too, that athletes who are not healthy injury-wise are not encouraged to play if they're not healthy. Some questions we're kind of grappling with right now as a society is, in terms of youth sport, will be, what will the demand look like at the local levels? As travel teams are somewhat put on hold and financial resources may be more restricted, is there going to be an increase in demand at this local community level? And will we have the ability to put on high quality programs with high quality coaches at a reasonable cost or affordable cost for families? Also the question of, will parents even want to return to what youth sports looked like before? They've been spending some extended time as families, and these past 3 months have not been running all around transporting their kids to sports. So what does that look like for us? And then how do we ensure a safe return? So I think at the higher levels, those athletes are pretty well guarded in terms of building up to full speed, but at the youth level, there's a concern that the youth sports are going to go from 0 to 60 really quickly, and it's going to create this overuse injury problem. And so again, our coaches are the ones who really need to understand how to really get them back into sport in an appropriate way. In the collegiate professional world, like I said earlier, our biggest concern with this group is the mental health, and how do we prioritize and access their mental health while also understanding that performance is really the priority, one of the priorities. But very concerned about that, and also just grappling with this idea of individual and remote training to help them develop. What can we continually help them to do while at this time when they're not on campus or they're not working out with their team? So lots of questions we have, but I think where we've landed right now is that we know there's an opportunity to expand and focus on coaching, developing, and supporting the whole athlete. Sports medicine physicians, they take pride in treating the whole athlete. And so I think our reset is really trying to push out this idea that we can coach the whole athlete and treat them and use COVID as kind of an opportunity as opposed to a crisis. So I'll stop there and happy to answer more questions as well.
Great, thank you so much, Stephanie. It's covered a lot of ground there, and I do have one request. If you could go ahead and drop the link to the Hope webinar into the chat. We've had multiple requests for that, so
sure, we'll do.
Go ahead and do that, and then we will turn it over to Kelly.
Thanks, Roch. All right, I think I'm bringing up the rear here. Thanks, everybody. What a great segue. Stephanie, such great information. And it's just affirms that what we're doing at Positive Coaching Alliance is on the right track, which is really great to hear from different perspectives in terms of safety, health, mental health. So Positive Coaching Alliance has been representing the whole athlete for over 20 years now. And we do coach training, and we are the positive voice of research-based character education in sports. And our bread and butter for 21 years has been live workshop training. We do in-person, interactive, dynamic workshops where coaches can challenge and be challenged, and to be able to work with other coaches to do great things in their programs. So obviously the biggest challenge has been no live workshops. So we actually have acted very quickly, like many of you have, to continue our mission of developing better athletes, better people, but we've had to do it in a different way. So I'm just going to share with you a few of those ways. The mission has not stopped. The mission has stayed the same. And as far as I'm concerned, it's gotten even more important with all of these things going on. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share with you a little bit about some of the resources that Positive Coaching Alliance has been putting out to athletes and coaches and parents. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of a sample of what we do for some of our Zoom live workshops, our virtual trainings, to keep everybody still engaged right now. So the first thing I just wanted to share, I put in the chat box, if you noticed, I put in some of our research, some of our website links that can help you. And I just wanted to show you this real quickly, because life is a team sport is what we've switched over to very quickly. We talk about life lessons all the time. Life is a team sport, and we've done so much work with, and this is just the website. This is not a PowerPoint, so you can scroll through this on your own, but I just want to show you what's available. We have free online courses. Positive Coaching Alliance has always done online courses, but now we're offering them free during this pandemic for parents, for officials, for athletes, not for coaches, because we're still doing those via Zoom, but discounted rates, of course. And so again, if you just scroll through here, I'm not going to stop and read it, but if you scroll through here, you will see all the different opportunities we have for online courses that we're still teaching. The other part is that we're adding a lot of social media responses. So we have a Facebook Live happening twice a week with live tips and tools from some of our national trainers. We also have, we've been bringing in lots of our National Advisory Board members, which are professional coaches, professional athletes, former coaches, and they're getting a chance to do a one-on-one talk. So we have resources with those. You can see the tips and tools on our website leading all the way through. So the link that I put on there, the Life is a Team Sport, is right there for you. The biggest shift has been switching over to Zoom workshops. And again, this is another link that I put in there. All of our workshops have switched over to Zoom. And just to give you an idea of what that looks like, people are Zoomed out. We get that. I'm part of the training department, and I have absolutely loved, and Roch as well, love doing in-person training. So how do you make a product that can train coaches to get them as passionate and as excited about it over Zoom? So let me give you just a quick little idea on how we've been able to do that. And it's been really exciting to be on the cutting edge of this and how to make these just as great as they've always been. And we've gotten such wonderful feedback. So for example, we would do a coach workshop. We have now converted 90% of our workshops that we had planned for these last 2 months over to the Zoom format. And we do offer workshops for coaches, high school coaches, youth coaches. We do them in positive motivation. We do them for mastery. We do leadership organization workshops where we can help your organization kind of reboot the leadership. And what an awesome opportunity. As many of the speakers have said, this is a great opportunity right now. I've been calling this sort of the quote unquote off season, a great time for coaches to rethink their culture, rethink their coaching staff, rethink how they've been working with athletes in the past. And it's a time to kind of look at that from a top-down point of view and say, what can change here? I always call it red light, yellow light, green light. What should we stop doing? What should we keep doing more of? And what do we need to kind of check into a little bit? So that's been really great. We also have been doing workshops for colleges. We've been doing them for college level athletes. We hit that right away. As soon as the season's ended, we thought we need to support them any way that we can. So this is just a quick sample of what we do at our workshops. We share with them the reach. You can see, this is just to let you know, since 1998, we have over 3,500 partnerships, and Positive Coaching Alliance partners with schools. So it's not just a workshop in the door and out. We're really trying to partner to help them and give them lots of these resources that we have. We're able to measure our impact through texting. We've always done this, texting to sign in for workshops. So now we have a way to reach coaches and to make sure that they're getting this message and they're texting to sign in, and we have a database of that. One of the things we found is really, really helpful in a lot of our coach training that we've done are breakout rooms during Zoom workshops. And this is a way that we've been able to take our workshops when we have 60 to 70 coaches on a workshop. And nothing like this right now. If this were my Zoom PCA workshop, I'd be cringing, because I want to get people's cameras on, microphones on. I want to get you participating. I want to get your thumbs up, hands up, virtual hands, whatever it is, chat box, questions, breakout rooms. The workshop does not stop from the beginning to end. And the feedback that we've gotten is, this was the quickest hour. This is the quickest 90 minutes I've ever seen. So we like to get into breakout rooms so that coaches can really think about what's happening. But the topic now has shifted. It's not, you know, how are you coaching now, but how are you going to be coaching right now, connecting with your team, and then how are we going to return to sports later? We're able to show videos from our National Advisory Board members. I'm not going to show you that right now. But again, we've been able to do lots of training with leaders, with coaches, which again, the mission is striving to win and teach life lessons, parents, and with athletes. And I think the voice of positivity has been such a welcome, refreshing change. So the coaches and participants in our workshops have just given us lots and lots of great feedback. So our model of striving to win and teaching life lessons, I think the idea of teaching life lessons has never been more relevant than it is now. And that's what we're sort of pushing in our coach education, that coaches have such an opportunity to help their athletes through these life lessons of resilience, these life lessons. And I would actually, if I was at a workshop, I'd have y'all type in a life lesson that sports has taught you right now. So if Roch feels like dealing with that chat room, feel free to type that in, because it's so cool to see what sports is teaching you and what you're drawing from sports to use in your life right now. So I like to give Roch work to do, so feel free to chat that in. Again, the shift that we've made is really focusing on filling emotional tanks is one of our main principles that we talk about in positive coaching. How do we keep our athletes' tanks full? And again, as Stephanie says as well, we're not just talking about physically right now. We're missing that physical interpersonal aspect. We're talking about mental health, psychological health, physical health, that connection, the depression, the symptoms that they're just missing, and coaches have a big role to play in that. So we're getting to hear from National Advisory Board members that are talking about how to work with your teams on gratitude. We're talking about how to get your teams together. I'm sure a lot of you are doing this, virtual team meetings using Zoom, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, House Party, things that are not just, maybe they shouldn't all just be social. Maybe they should be social and have a content component, goal setting sessions, things that you can do to hold your team together. This is an example of a coach that's been doing social distance meetings with all of her players. She's been going for walks. You can see she's staying far apart. She met with the seniors first, went through the whole entire team, and has been doing goal setting walks, 15-minute walks with each player on your team. It's so important to do. So then we're giving them tools also to use throughout right now, and then as they return, talking about using empathy, talking about checking in with players, following health and safety guidelines, having a welcome back. The kids are going to need to be welcomed back in a different way. You can't just expect to jump in the way you always have. And we're doing workshops for national organizations. Tomorrow I'm doing a workshop for USA Gymnastics. And the big concern there is these gymnasts have had muscle atrophy over the last couple of months, but their muscle memory is the same. They think they're going to jump right back on those uneven bars, and they just don't have it. So one of the things PCA does so well is help work on the mental game and help athletes deal with having failures, making mistakes, bouncing back, being strong, having that growth mindset. And the last part that someone also mentioned earlier, we focus on leadership for all. This is an opportunity for coaches to recognize that the leaders that they may have had before this all happened might not be able to handle this, and the new leaders are going to emerge. I have a daughter that's a junior in high school, and her spring lacrosse season got canceled, and she said, "Mom, I went from a sophomore to a senior. How did that happen?" Well, it's hard to lead when you haven't been led. So she's now going through a lot of issues. We're talking about leaders with these athletes, and how do you bump from one whole grade in your sport? So this is something that we're super excited about. PCA is moving along full bore. And again, the opportunities are there. I have the website there if you have any other questions. One of the greatest resources also that we've been sharing at a lot of our workshops is our Development Zone website. And I'm just going to show you what that looks like for those of you that aren't familiar with it. These are the Zoom workshops. You can look and see a little sample of our Zoom workshops. But this is a resource center that Positive Coaching Alliance has been using for years. But it's something that a lot of coaches didn't realize. I can just type in, playing time, and I can hit search, and a whole section will come up that gives me lots of tools that I can deal with as a coach. How do I deal with playing time? How do I deal with injuries? And your coaches can use a lot of these resources right now while the teams aren't together. I'd much rather send my team a video of Janine Tucker, the head coach of Johns Hopkins lacrosse, so that she can talk about staying positive in this crisis than just hearing from me. So that's where PCA is changing. One of the things that's exciting is that because these Zoom workshops have gotten so much great press, that a lot of the chapters, some of our 17 chapters throughout the country, have said, can we continue this when this is all over and sports come back? It's a really great opportunity to get parents together. Parents are always tough to get them in the room together. So doing Zoom workshops for parents. We have a chapter in Hawaii, and they've said it's very difficult to get coaches together to fly to different islands and do these workshops. So this is an awesome opportunity as well. So I believe these virtual workshops, these interactive Zoom workshops that we're doing are going to be something that we continue. And what we've been hearing from coaches left and right is the opportunity that this has been to bring the teams together, for coaches to connect on a different level with their athletes because they have had time to get to know them as people, will really just be something that they're not going to forget. And I had a coach yesterday just tell me that, my preseason connection with the kids has been, here's your workout, make sure you're getting in the weight room, make sure you're doing your running, make sure you're doing your distance. And what they said they think they're going to do next year before the season starts is start with Zoom, start with meetings, start with getting to know you, icebreakers, connection, bringing that as part of their team, which I think is such an awesome, valuable resource. So that's where PCA is. I left my email address in there as well, and all the Positive Coaching Alliance websites. Any of you have any questions, feel free. So Roch, back to you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I can tell that my smile muscles are out of shape, because that kind of wore me out watching all of you talk, but especially the last one. And just thank you for bringing a lot of positive things that are happening. No pun intended. We still have a little bit of time. Kind of one of the things that really struck me and that Eric said is that we have been tested. Clearly one of the things that has happened from this is we've been asked to evaluate everything that we do. And and it's very, very refreshing to hear everybody talk about how you responded to the call, how your organizations just rallied and got very proactive in the changes. So there were a lot of questions in the chat. Kristen has promised that she is going to do that. She will assemble the chat notes and make those available after the virtual summit. But I do want to do, in kind of for those of you that are of a certain vintage, remember the McLaughlin group, kind of an exit question for us. We had a couple of very specific mentions about the use of national team members or national advisory board members. I was wondering if, how have you found that? And for those of you that didn't mention that in your presentations, have you been able to reach out to alumni or to other members of the community and be able to pull, and how have you used pulling them in terms of the adjustments that you've made with your coaching education? So I think we'll jump to Karen first, and then I'll let it just kind of open up from there.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, that's a great question. So on the academic side, one of the things I was able to do in my classes was reach out to exactly that, alums who are currently coaching somewhere right now. So from our alums from our academic program, and it was really valuable. It did a couple of things. It broke up the monotony of me on Zoom and letting them hear different voices a little bit, but it also was able to give real life perspective. And we did this right around the time when you know, NCAA was making decisions about if seniors could come back for that extra year of eligibility, and like right in that decision time. So I brought in some alums that were coaching specifically right now, and allowing them to kind of get in with our current students and what do you really have to think about in these situations. This is more than just, you know, how are you running a practice or these sort of things, but what are all those complexities and intricacies that we don't quite get to. And I try and tell them, but unless you're in it, you don't get it. So I was able to use those resources for that reason.
I know for Positive Coaching Alliance, it's been a lot of fun to bring in professional athletes that are home. It's been really neat when we have workshops in local areas. We had Sean Cork, who's a coach of the Boston Cannons professional lacrosse team. And there was a youth lacrosse workshop up in New England and in Boston. And they said, hey, could you get on for the first 5 minutes? So it was really cool. They've been able to pull a professional athlete into some of their workshops. And we have over 200 national advisory board members. So it's been really neat when they're in the local area of the chapter and we've been able to pull them in, just coaches just thinking they're getting on a workshop with PCA and having, you know, Julie Foudy pop up. So again, it's not something we guarantee, but if someone has a connection with someone like that, it's been really cool to be able to pull that in.
Looks like Eric's unmuted. You got, what can you share with us?
Yeah, from the NSCA, it's not alumni, so to speak, but, you know, we are a membership organization, and we have, when we look at our members and our certificates, we're a family of 60,000 people. So, you know, we are relying on that group is our approach. And I think, you know, a good example of that was we had an Illinois state town hall a few nights ago, and this popped up within 48 hours of the event because they were progressing into stage 3, and they were there was just a lot of questions. And so I think it's sort of seizing the moment is the approach when you're asked to, like you said, step up, when you're asked to step up and contribute, and that's something we can do from the NSCA is help our state affiliates, our state, our directors at the state level to be leaders in their community, sort of from the top down. That is the approach. So it's key during this time that we all emphasize communication structures and use as many resources as possible. So yeah, that's a great concept.
I'll just add something real quick too. You know, AMSM, we've kind of been a little behind the game, especially because the first month or so, a lot of our physicians were redeployed to the front lines. And so that was kind of taking care of them first. But now, as the pandemic has started to kind of become more controlled in the different areas of the country, they're really looking to be able to share their voice. So if any of you have, are looking for somebody to kind of give that perspective, we are certainly willing to connect you with local sports medicine physicians at all different levels to help with that.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Tom, you're actually the one that started this all off. So you want to give us one more thing here, and then I think I got one more question before we wrap up.
Well, I just think that when we've done it with that, we've used our national team athletes to have a weekly meeting. And one of the guys that works now in my area was a 04, 08, and 12 Olympian. And we were starting to, quote, run out of national team athletes. He got on the call with us and, look, you guys need to do this. You need to give back to the sport. I get that it's time consuming, but if you do this for 5 or 10 minutes with a team, it'll come back in spades next year in the Olympic year. So it was a huge win for that. And we got a lot more athletes now volunteering to do that as well.
Awesome. All right. And then one question that I do want to address. So if anybody's got a specific response to this, and we'll get to that before I land the plane, so to speak, is those of you that have practical requirements for your coaching certifications that like require watching somebody coach or require athletes to be available in order to evaluate the coach for that. what are the creative things that you've had and that have come up to deal with that particular situation? I think maybe Eric might be the first person to go to here. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd say that is a question that we're still answering in a lot of ways. From an applied perspective, just looking at the CSCS, a lot of that work gets done beforehand. So people who are looking to take that exam right now would ideally have most of their applied experience up to that point. It has affected courses like our Foundation of Coaching List course, or just our exam prep is a good example of that. And so like Anna at USA Weightlifting, you know, doing those virtually has been valuable, but there is something lost when you don't have that weight room element. I have seen over the years programs, and for some reason I always think of this one, University of Hawaii, because it's so highly sought after, would have their interns to apply for that internship. You had to submit some pretty extensive videos of yourself coaching. So I do see that as a proactive step towards, you know, getting yourself on tape and evaluating. That is something that in the game, you know, I used to started my career, I was a football GA, breaking down game film. And I think as a college football player, when you first see yourself on tape, it is a little bit of a wake-up call of what you do well and what you don't do well. And so that doesn't, you know, from speaking to coaching and anything, that is a valuable tool. So I think we're learning that right now through all the interaction that we have. And I would say from a program standpoint, that's something we're still working through.
All right, thank you so much. So, and thank you to all of the panelists, to Tom, Karen, Eric, Stephanie, and Kelly. It's been like a fire hose of information over the last 75 minutes. Thank you for everybody for joining us and for your activity in the chat. I'm gonna jump over and share this quickly. Just a reminder that the summit itself continues tomorrow, beginning at 11 a.m. Eastern time. That's, and you know, subtract an hour for everybody else. And be sure to tune in. There'll be a special link for that for those of you that are registered, and there's still time to do that for tomorrow if you wish. Also, the announcement that the USCCE membership assembly will begin in approximately 15 minutes. And there is a special link for that. It will not be on this particular one. Again, thanks to KT Tape. Thanks to the USCCE board for putting this together and giving us an opportunity to share and to get inspiration and education from those of us in the community. Please join me in thanking the panel, and I will shoot it back to Kristen.
Thank you very much, Roch, and thank you everybody for a great day. As he noted, the link for the membership assembly is up a little bit in the chat. It was sent a little while ago. It was also sent to members directly last week and again today. And I can't thank everybody enough. We had some great facilitation, and we had some amazing panelists, and I really appreciate the continued conversation and the willingness of everyone to share as we really grow the profession of what we do. So look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow bright and early. And for some of you, I'll see you in 15 short minutes on a whole new Zoom link. So see you later. Thank you, everyone.